What is a self anyways? It's just, the idea that you exist independently from anything and everything else, but you can't really survive in a bubble. That's only a thought. It's also just seeing that there's no self and there's no other things. Because to have a self, there has to be something in relation to this self. There are other things. It's almost like this idea that you can control other things or other things can influence you, or even that you can influence you. That there are things interacting with each other. But if there are things and they're interacting, that implies that they're separate, that they're not already just one and just kind of flowing naturally. You know how you get really engrossed into an activity or something and you forget yourself and it just kind of flows. So what a self does, it just kind of resists what's happening by thinking, like, how can I change my experience? How can I make this better? How can I make this worse? It's always that analysis. When you're analyzing, you're not really present for what's here. And yet, when you're gone, your idea of yourself, these thoughts about yourself, things just kind of flow naturally. So, in a way, a self is just almost the mind trying to create a you that can control what's happening, even though what's happening is kind of just unfolding naturally by itself. So when the idea of you just gets out the way, things just flow and you don't have to argue against it. You're not resisting it. You're not trying to manipulate it. That doesn't mean you just do nothing, because if you're trying to force doing nothing, that's just more control. It's kind of like when you're thirsty, you just get up and go get a drink of water. You don't gotta really force yourself. It's just a really natural, spontaneous urge. You don't even get a control when you're thirsty. You can try to think yourself like, I shouldn't be thirsty or I shouldn't drink right now. Like, those are just thoughts though, but the inclination, like, I'm thirsty, is just kind of natural. It's just kind of it just kind of happens. In the same way, like when you move, you kind of just move. You don't have like this guidebook or instruction manual for moving. It just kind of happens. I mean, you can try finding yourself as you move, or even just move in your hand. Like, can you explain how your hand moves? Because I sure can't. Kind of just happening on its own. I can't really explain it. It almost feels like you're doing something, but that's just a thought taking ownership of things that are just kind of happening. It's hard to talk about because I feel like the more I go on, the crazier I sound. But this self is just really trying to always get a better experience, or just it wants a certain experience. It's always referencing what can I do or change? How can things be different so it can fit what I want? But these are all just thoughts coming. And the more you're caught in thought, you're just avoiding feeling like as deeply as possible and really feeling connected. Like if someone threw a stick at you, you just kind of get out the way. You don't gotta think, oh, I'm Johnny, I'm going to get out the way. If I did that, the stick would hit me in the face and I'd probably be sad, or at least just hurt. That's kind of like what a self is, this really, this thought that's trying to understand and really manipulate what's happening. All it does is kind of numb this natural flow of everything. Like the most spontaneous thing to do would probably just, well, get out of the way of the stick, but I don't gotta think about it. I don't gotta refer to myself like, oh, I gotta get out the way. It just kind of happens. Like when you drive, it's just kind of obvious. At least if you've learned how. honestly, I don't really know what else to say about this. I feel like I'm trying to describe the color red, but I don't know how I describe red other than just look, it's red. I don't know what makes red red, just look at it. So how do you look at that there isn't the self? That's the hard thing, is just slow down enough and just see what it's like to have things flow naturally without saying I did this or someone else did this or I don't like this or I don't like this. Wait, I just said that twice. Just seeing that preferences don't really matter. Things kind of just unfold. You can still be repulsed or attracted to things, but there isn't really a you deciding I like this or I don't like this. You never got to pick your preferences, anyways. Like, I like mangoes, some people don't. I never had a choice in the matter. That's another thing a self does. It kind of makes you feel like you have a choice in the matter. I never really had a choice in what on why I like mangoes. Other people didn't have a choice that they didn't like it. Like, the sense of self really wants to give you the sense of agency, the agency to just control and just get what you want instead of just loosening up and just letting things just go naturally. Not a defeated letting go where you just sit and do nothing. That's just more control. So just letting your body move the way it does naturally, being interested in what you are interested in naturally. It's like someone telling you, you should like this. And these are like the 20 reasons why you should like this. As opposed to, that just looks cool. I'm gonna probably spend some time with it. Or if you're someone that likes to compete, it's the difference between getting good at something because you want to appear a certain way, or you want to get something out of it, versus just doing it because it's interesting and then you forget about yourself instead of always wondering, am I doing good enough? And you're more focused on just the thing you're doing and it's just how does it make you feel? And one of the greatest things about not really feeling like there's a self is just, well, what are you comparing yourself to? There's nothing to compare. Like comparing apples to oranges, they're just different. You don't even have the thought of comparing them. You just, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. If there are certain benefits to it, you just feel it. You don't go about wondering about it. So you're trying to wonder, my favorite food, why do I like this? And you're trying to explain it. It's not really the same as just having a bite of it. It's not as interesting. Yeah, I feel like the more I talk about this, the harder it gets. I can't describe red by just saying it's red. But that's what I want to do is just say there isn't the self, just see that there isn't. And a lot of your problems will just kind of go away. Or even maybe we can look at relationships. Like you sort of can't really control who you like or who you don't like. That was never a choice. If there was a self, maybe you could just decide, well, I want to like this type of person, but mentally saying I want something compared to the actual lived experience of it doesn't always align. Otherwise, people who are with abusive people would just decide, hey, I don't want to be in an abusive relationship, but If you look at their habits and tendencies, well, they're kind of just going back to that. It was never a choice they had. You can think it's a choice or think you should want better choices, but it just kind of happens that you're kind of not in control of this. This self gives you this hope that you can control your life or your experiences. So just letting go and letting things flow naturally. Not the type of flow where you're just admitting defeat and throwing your hands and saying, I'm not going to do anything in like a really practical way. I didn't bring up the relationship example, and I don't want to encourage someone to be like, oh, well, I don't have a choice but to be in abusive relationships. That would be a pretty terrible thing to say. It's more of the attraction to that. You never really had a choice in that, if that's just how things have unfolded. There's a lot of things where you never had a say in any of this. You can call that your karma. Just that's just how things are for you. You're interested in these things. But you never had the choice. If you had a choice, you can just say, I don't know, maybe one day I'll like avocados. I'm gonna just say here, I don't like avocados. But I can just say I should like it and I'll start liking it. It just doesn't seem to work. It's really knowing what you've got and being okay with it. It doesn't mean you can't try to make better decisions or choices, but when that desire comes to change or see things differently, you can't really make it happen. It just kind of happens on its own. There's never a decision, oh, I'm gonna do better now. The self can try to take ownership of that, but it really just happens on its own quite naturally. Like if you're in pain a lot, the body is just gonna naturally try to avoid that pain. The self part is, oh, I'm deciding to avoid the pain. Like if I just grabbed your hand really hard and you broke free, the self part would be I broke free, even though you breaking free probably happened before the thought of I'm gonna break free or I'm the one that decided to break free. I don't know if that's a good example or not. And the self is always after the fact, after an action's happened. And it's like, oh, I did that. I broke free. Instead of just seeing, hey, the body kind of just moved on its own. When you get those thoughts of me or what I'm doing, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, and just let kind of the world just take care of itself, and there's just this really natural flow to it all. When I say the world, I don't mean like society, I mean just how things are just unfolding. You don't argue against that. I mean, the argument, all those are just thoughts. All these thoughts, all the selfing mechanism just stops you from experiencing directly what's happening. Because it feels quite vulnerable to just feel deeply. But that's what the self does. It just gets you to avoid feeling so vulnerable and so open. Because it doesn't feel safe. with the belief that it's not safe. That's just an opinion, and an opinion is just another thought. I mean, you can let go of all these thoughts and opinions and beliefs and anything that's trying to manipulate experience. You can really touch into this sense of vulnerability that just feels open and connected. Because there's no you to say otherwise. There's no you that says, I should feel better. I should feel worse. This sense of self just stops you from feeling completely. It stops you from going, I feel bad, so I can change the way how I feel. Or I can feel better. Always going back to me, 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 back into your head. Instead of just admitting, hey, I feel this, and just letting yourself feel that directly. And having your body really naturally responding to how you feel. This is probably the hardest thing to talk about. I feel like it's probably the worst thing I've said on camera because like I'm trying to talk about red and just say, um, well, it's red. Look at it. I don't know how to describe red other than to say it's red. Look, red. Anyways, maybe this helped a little. I keep going silent, but that's just the best teacher. It's just when you're just stunned enough where you don't really know what to say and you kind of just don't. And it's just peaceful. Because you don't have to figure it out anymore. You gotta just be exactly as you are. And that's more than enough. Anyways, this is almost 20 minutes. This is way too long. I feel like I just spent 20 minutes describing red by saying it's red. A really weird analogy that I keep going back to, but I don't know what else to say. Anyways, take care.